For this retro anime review, we're going to take a look at one of the most bizarre and violent OVAs of the 80s, Violence Jack, Evil Town. This OVA was released in 1988. It is actually the second of 3 OVAs based on Go Nagai's Violence Jack manga. Go Nagai, of course, being the famous creator of the Devilman series. Violence Jack is actually somewhat of a sequel to Devilman. It's not exactly a direct sequel, but it's a bit of an alternate reality that takes place after the events of the Devilman manga. This OVA is the second of a series of 3 OVAs, the first being the Violence Jack Harlem Bomber OVA in 1986, followed by this OVA in 88 and the Hell's Wind OVA in 1990. I may take a look at the other OVAs at some point in the series, but I'm going to start here with the Evil Town OVA because to me it was the most memorable. It was the most strange and violent of the 3 OVAs, which made it stand out to me more than the others. None of the 3 OVAs really have great stories or anything, so the violence of this OVA is what makes it stand out to me, and to me seems to be its defining feature. The plot of this OVA follows after the events of the Harlem Bomber OVA, but the story is not really connected, and you could start watching at this OVA and understand the story just as well as if you watched the first one. The first OVA didn't really do much in terms of building the character of Violence Jack or giving too much explanation of what's going on anyway. And the story is pretty simple, so there's no harm starting here if you wanted to. This OVA was directed by one of the most legendary animators of his time, Ichirou Itano. He became known as one of the greatest animators of space battles and mechs after doing the animation for several famous anime, including Megazone 2-3, Space Runaway Ideon, Wings of Hanemis, Urusei Yatsura, and quite a number of other notable projects. He's undeniably one of the greatest animators of all time, but I'm not quite as big of a fan of his works as a director as I am of his works as an animator. He directed some of the most wild and violent OVAs of his time, including these 2 Violence Jack OVAs, Angel Cop, Battle Royale High School, and more recently, the Gantz TV series. The story takes place in a post-apocalyptic Japan after there was a massive earthquake that destroyed most of the country. It was a cataclysmic event that destroyed the country, and now the country is a lawless place. Bandits and criminals run wild and terrorize the innocent survivors that are not able to defend themselves. Violence Jack is a character that is a mysterious, gigantic man that carries a huge knife. He doesn't have any memory of where he came from, and no one knows who he is or where he came from either. Violence Jack would often suddenly show up at times to fight against the evildoers and protect the innocent people that are being abused by them. As I said, it is somewhat of a sequel to Devilman, and later on in the manga, it's revealed that Violence Jack is somewhat of a reincarnation of Devilman, and his purpose is to continue its fight against Satan. The reason it's not a true sequel to Devilman is because it was originally kind of written as one, but then later on, Go Nagai wrote Devilman Lady, which was more of a true direct sequel to Devilman, and then Violence Jack was considered to kind of be like an alternate timeline. This OVA takes place in a shopping mall that has fallen underground during the Great Earthquake. The inhabitants of this mall are split up into 3 groups. One is a group of supermodels, because of course it is. One of the other groups is a group of male office workers, and the third group is a Mad Max style biker gang that terrorizes the other groups. And this goes about as well as you might imagine. After being attacked by the 2 other groups, the models end up fleeing and manage to lock themselves away to protect them from the other 2 groups. The group of men end up discovering Violence Jack buried in the wall for some reason, and when he wakes up, they try to convince him to join their side and protect them against the biker gang. The 2 groups meet up at some sort of market, and some women from the group of models show up, and Violence Jack switches to their side when he hears what the other groups have done to those women. Violence Jack goes back with the women, and a fight breaks out between the groups where the group of bikers decides to launch an attack on the other groups, and the group of office workers end up getting wiped out by the biker gang group. The rest of the OVA is basically just the fight between this group of bikers and Violence Jack. There's not much story to it. It's mostly just about the action from here on out. Violence Jack will fight against this group of bikers in order to protect the women. The group has all sorts of crazy villains. There's the leader of the group, a gigantic man called Madsaurus, who reminds me of a ripoff of Lord Humongous from Mad Max. He's violent and evil and too powerful for any of the other people in the mall to be able to stand up to him in any way and protect himself against him, at least until Violence Jack shows up. He has a hermaphrodite girlfriend who's also really violent, and there's another woman in the group that at one point murders a bunch of kids with throwing knives. All these villains will end up meeting their end at the hands of Violence Jack, where he dispatches of them in brutal ways. Comes up to the climax where Madsaurus discovers that Violence Jack had killed his girlfriend. After he finds out that Violence Jack has killed his girlfriend, he eats her remains, and for some reason this causes him to transform into this gigantic red monster who's strong enough to fight against Violence Jack on even ground for a little bit before he's eventually destroyed also. The story in this OVA is really not great. All the characters are just one note, either irredeemable villains or the women that just serve to be victims to the villains. The only reason why someone would really want to watch this OVA is for the over-the-top violence. If you go into the OVA looking for that to see one of the most violent and gory OVAs of its time, then you'll be entertained and you won't be disappointed. But if you go into it looking for any good story or anything, you definitely will be. It's probably in the top 3 most violent anime that I've ever seen. It's probably right there in the top 3 with Genocyber and Angel Cop. I'm not sure exactly which one's more violent, it's pretty close. But I have on occasion heard this OVA described as the most violent anime of all time. The animation and everything is okay, it's well made enough. You'll definitely see a lot of crazy violence, people getting decapitated and torn apart in various ways. In this one there's way too much scenes of women getting assaulted. There's a few like couple minute montages of it that go on for a pretty long time, so if that's a problem for you, you should probably skip this OVA. I would probably give it a 2 stars out of 5. It's well animated and well made enough to be watchable in a way, and the violence and gore is so over the top that there's not a lot like it. You'll definitely see some crazy stuff like the scene where the guy eats his girlfriend's corpse to transform into a monster and stuff like that that you'll never see in any other anime. So while it's not a great anime, I would say it could be worth watching just for the spectacle of it. And that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. It does actually help my videos a lot when people like them, so it would mean a lot to me if you would do that for me. And I do have more videos on the way, so thanks for watching.